The Red Wing Iron Rangers, model 8111, this example in amber harness leather, is well regarded in heritage boot circles as being one of the icons of the new heritage boot movement. And this is in part due to its impressive specifications and build quality. But even more than that, it has a fascinating design story that is frankly quite unexpected. And in this video, beyond going through the mere technical specifications of this boot, we'll be explaining the full heritage perspective and modern perspective that this boot brings in its origins, design ideas, manufacturing process, and final execution. Lastly, in light of the considerations made about this model in particular, I'll speak more broadly about the authenticity of the heritage boot movement. Imagine the radiance of the aurora borealis, the northern lights, the cold air on your face before you descended into darkness. The Mesabi Iron Range in northern Minnesota. Discovered in 1866, this is the largest iron ore deposit in the USA, and its dangerous work of mining became a booming prospect at the turn of the 20th century. In northern Minnesota, the mineral deposits led to perilous back-breaking efforts to expand the mining industry in the Midwest. The Iron Ranger namesake depicts a rugged, tough lifestyle, a lifestyle which nevertheless gave rise to a meaningful sense of solidarity amongst the miners and enabled them to work collectively for justice and for a more dignified work environment. So it would seem that the Red Wing Iron Rangers have a lot to live up to considering their namesake. There are a number of distinctive aspects of the construction of the boot that are particularly robust. Most notably, we had the quadruple stitched double layer toe cap. This is also certainly an important stylistic aspect of the shoe. Secondly, we have an exterior heel pocket, which means that there's more leather used to help shape the exterior of the boot. The overall feeling of the boot is that there's just a lot of high quality leather used throughout the entire construction of the boot. Although the rich oil tanned amber harness leather is perhaps one of the softer leathers in the Iron Ranger line, it nevertheless did take a bit of breaking in for me to find these boots to be truly comfortable around my ankles. They are also a heavier boot, which I'll be getting into more detail about in a little bit, but this is probably thanks partially to the dense nitrile cork outsole and the use of a steel shank in the boot. Now this does have traditional Goodyear welt construction, and in all of my other Red Wing videos I've explained what this construction method is. It's very ubiquitous for this traditional style of boot, and so I'm not going to explain it fully here. But what's important is that the combination of the Goodyear welt and the hammered sole is going to enable this shoe to be recrafted as is necessary. As is commonplace with these heritage boots, we have a leather-lined, cork-filled insert on the inside of the shoe, which is going to enable the shoe to be broken in very well. Now, I have found that the exterior heel pocket doesn't seem to really add greatly to the construction. As you can see here on the inside tag, we have all of the essential information about this model. I am wearing an 11.5, which is just about a half size down my normal size, which is typical for Red Wings. I went with a normal width with this size boot. You can see there that there's two separate pieces of leather, one for the heel cup, and then the remaining piece of the footbed is also a separate piece of leather. The stitching doesn't really make the boot any more comfortable than, say, a pair of Red Wing 875s with a inner heel cup, but it is a nicely integrated feature which just shows how much leather is being used for the heel cup in this particular model. Here we have an excellent cross-section from the blog Blind Bully, which does an excellent job reviewing boots, and they have a great written review of the Iron Rangers. Notice, however, that the vamp is made of cloth, which in my opinion is probably a cost-cutting measure in this boot, unfortunately. We do have a fully gusseted tongue, which means that debris is going to be kept out, as well as enhanced waterproofing is going to be possible with the right uses of waxes or other kinds of agents in these boots. And the leather on these boots in particular seems to be of a thinner type than the rest of the leather compared to some of the mock toe boots that I've had. but it seems to work just fine as far as containing the foot more securely and keeping items out. Lacing the boots up is a quick and comfortable affair thanks to a combination of O-eyelets as well as a quick speed hook style eyelet for the upper portion of the boot. And in the Iron Ranger boots, they come with a thinner style of shoelace, which is easy to double knot and easy to tie and hides easily under a cuffed pant. My experience of these boots on the feet is that they have all of the kind of traditional comfortable elements of leather boots that in some ways you have to earn. You have to break these boots in. The leather is thick and supple, but it's very high quality, so it's going to conform to the shape of your feet. So that's true of every part of the leather, not just the upper, also the insole. The cork filling is going to mean that the bottom of the shoes, even though they're not supportive, are going to conform to the shape of your feet in a way that is very unique. I have found that the Nitrile cork outsole, which is a combination of cork and rubber, although it primarily feels like a rubber outsole, is fairly slick and fairly dense compared to the traction tread outsole on, for example, these Red Wing 8138s, which are a similar style of leather, maybe with a slightly more textured, a more reddish leather, and has the famous traction tread outsole and mock toe style of the Red Wing 877s or the Red Wing 875s, which were introduced in 1953. There's also a noticeable weight difference between the two styles of boots, probably thanks in part to the steel shank in the Iron Rangers. I do intend to make a second video going into greater depth about the differences of the cap toe design of the Iron Rangers and the mock toe design of other Red Wing boots, in this case the Red Wing 8138s. But I think it's suffice to say that I do find the 8138s more comfortable and less formal. I find that the outsole on the 8138s is a little more forgiving, and just the shape of the mock toe design tends to conform to the foot somewhat more naturally. But it's certainly true that the Iron Ranger style and its cap toe design is maybe more traditional, more commonplace style, and definitely more formal, and probably also more versatile. You might imagine these beautiful USA-made boots with leather from a U.S. tannery owned by Red Wing, utilizing a heritage stitching style and much beloved construction throughout the boot, highlighted especially by the Goodyear welt, that such a fellow designing these boots would be some hoary old man, some Minnesotan with generations of connections to Red Wing's heritage style and design. If you initially assumed this like me, you couldn't actually be more wrong, because the Red Wing Iron Rangers was designed by a Japanese designer working now for Red Wing named Akinobu Iwasaki. Interestingly, Red Wing's Heritage Division was officially created in 2005, and these heritage designs, which are largely revived or re-inspired designs, have been a huge success in Japan. In an excellent article in the Minneapolis St. Paul magazine, Aki describes himself as an archaeologist for Red Wing, and apparently his expertise enabled him to find a design from 1910 similar to the Iron Ranger, and yet his design expertise enabled him to basically introduce the new Iron Ranger design in 2009. I've got to say my hat's off to the guy for taking a idea from an old catalog and creating an entirely new boot design, which is so successful. The American boot industry has a tremendous legacy, but unfortunately it's been steadily on the decline for decades. For example, in 1968 there was 233,000 workers in the boot industry. But now in 2014 we only have 13,900, at least according to one source that I found. Perhaps for some, heritage boots and heritage apparel in general is an attempt to reach some long-lost nostalgic era when the world was more real. But for me, the intrinsic quality of these boots and the real skill and effort and industry that went into these boots is an authenticity in its own right. I can imagine there being a perennial appeal for well-constructed, conservatively designed boots that are entirely recraftable. It could be something that could be passed on, the way that my dad's appreciation of Red Wing boots, as I described in my 8138 review, was passed on to me. And so in the meantime, fresh designers, fresh approaches, a new look at heritage design is, to me, a very welcome thing. It might be fair to say that Red Wing's Iron Rangers don't live up to the bold, heroic fight for justice which the Iron Rangers have come to historically represent in Minnesota's history. However, I do think it's fair to say that these boots have become emblematic of a renewed interest in craftsmanship and an example of what can be accomplished with a fresh approach to heritage footwear. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you liked and shared it. And if you're new to my channel, I want to invite you to subscribe. As always, thank you so much for your time.